casino manager's romance with a Filipino dealer triggers a jealous ex-boyfriend's deadly rage. 17 stab wounds, 2 murders, 1 killer who got away. This is the story of a love triangle that ended in blood. Vincent Reeves stood in the center of the Palazzo Royale casino floor, surrounded by the symphony of slot machines, the rhythmic shuffle of cards, and the quiet murmur of high-stakes conversation. At 48 years old, he had spent the last 12 years managing this glittering kingdom of chance and fortune, and he knew every corner, every camera angle, every sound that meant someone was winning or losing more than they could afford. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and expensive perfume, the kind that lingered on designer clothes and whispered of old money. Overhead, crystal chandeliers caught the light and scattered it across the plush burgundy carpet, turning the entire floor into a stage where dreams were made and broken every single night. But Vincent wasn't watching the tables or the guests tonight. His attention was fixed on table 7, where Cristina Reyes dealt blackjack with the kind of practiced precision that came from dealing thousands of hands. She was 29, with dark hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail that revealed the elegant curve of her neck. Her dealer's uniform, black vest over white shirt, fit her perfectly, and when she moved, there was a grace to it that made Vincent's chest tighten. He watched as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so small and unconscious that it broke his heart a little. 48 years old, he thought, and I finally understand what they mean by butterflies. His marriage to Karen had been dead for years. 22 years together, and somewhere around year 15, they had stopped being husband and wife and become business partners managing a household. They had separate bedrooms now. Karen claimed it was because of his snoring, but they both knew the truth. They barely touched anymore. Their conversations revolved around their children's schedules, mortgage payments, and who would pick up groceries. Their daughter Emily was 17 and preparing for college applications. Their son Josh was 15 and lived with earbuds permanently attached to his head. Both children looked through Vincent rather than at him, as if he were a piece of furniture they had grown accustomed to ignoring. Cristina glanced up from her table and caught his eye. The smallest smile played at the corner of her mouth before she returned her attention to the cards. That tiny acknowledgement sent warmth spreading through Vincent's chest. He straightened his tie and moved through the casino floor, nodding to guests, checking in with pit bosses, maintaining the polished facade of authority that came with his position. But his mind was already 2 hours ahead, to when the casino would quiet down, when the late-night shift would take over, and when he and Cristina could be alone. At 2 in the morning, the casino floor had thinned to a handful of die-hard gamblers and insomniacs. Vincent's office was on the 3rd floor, accessed by a private elevator that required a keycard. The space was modest but well-appointed, with a mahogany desk, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Las Vegas Strip. Security monitors lined one wall, showing feeds from cameras throughout the casino. Vincent had systematically cleared his desk of family photos months ago, unable to look at Karen's frozen smile while his heart belonged to someone else. The knock on his door was soft. Vincent opened it to find Cristina standing in the hallway, still in her dealer's uniform, looking exhausted but beautiful. Her dark eyes were shadowed with fatigue, and when she spoke, her Filipino accent grew thicker, the way it always did when she was tired. "I wasn't sure you'd still be awake," she said quietly. Vincent stepped aside to let her in, locking the door behind her. The moment they were alone, Cristina seemed to deflate, all the energy draining from her body. He guided her to the leather couch and sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. She melted against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and for a long moment, they simply sat in silence. "I talked to a lawyer today," Vincent said finally, his voice low. "Divorce papers are being drawn up. It's really happening, Cristina." She pulled back to look at him, and he saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? It was gone before he could identify it. "Vincent, you don't have to do this for me," she whispered. "I'm doing it for us," he replied firmly. "For me. I've been dead for 20 years, Cristina. Just going through the motions, pretending to be alive. You brought me back. You made me remember what it feels like to actually want to wake up in the morning." Cristina's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. Vincent cupped her face gently, turning her back toward him. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Talk to me." "I'm just scared," she said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. "Everything is changing so fast." Vincent kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the faint smell of the casino floor, cards and felt and anticipation. "It's going to be okay," he promised. "I know it's complicated with your visa situation, but my lawyer says once we're married, that gets easier. We're going to do this right, Cristina. No more hiding. No more secrets." She nodded against his chest, but Vincent couldn't see the way her hands trembled, or the tears that slipped silently down her cheeks. 3 hours later, Cristina unlocked the door to her apartment in the Desert Palms complex, a low-rent building on the outskirts of the city, where the neon lights of the Strip were just a distant glow. The apartment was small, just a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom that never seemed to get warm enough. She was fumbling with her keys, exhaustion making her clumsy, when she realized the lights were off. She flipped the switch, and her heart stopped. Ramon Delgado sat in the single chair by the window, his body perfectly still in the darkness. He was 32 but carried himself like someone much older, someone who had seen violence and learned to speak its language fluently. Compact and muscular, his forearms were covered in tattoos, Filipino script that spelled out names and prayers and promises. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a fight in Manila that he never talked about. 3 hours overtime, Ramon said quietly, not moving. "That's what you're calling it now?" Cristina's throat went dry. She set her purse down slowly on the counter, trying to keep her hands steady. "Ramon, please. I'm tired. Can we not do this tonight?" He stood up then, moving with the kind of controlled grace that reminded Cristina of a predator. He crossed the small space between them in 3 steps and grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to remind her that he could. "You smell like him," Ramon said, his nose close to her neck. "That cologne. Expensive. You think I'm stupid, Cristina? I work in a casino," she said, trying to pull away. "I smell like a lot of things. Smoke, alcohol, people. That doesn't mean anything." Ramon's grip tightened just slightly, and Cristina winced. He noticed and immediately released her, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I helped you get that job," he said, his voice rising. "When you came here with nothing, who took care of you? Who made sure you had a place to stay, money to send home to your family? Me. I did that, and this is how you repay me." Cristina rubbed her wrist and moved to the kitchenette, putting distance between them. This was an old argument, one they'd had dozens of times. Ramon had helped her when she first arrived from Manila 3 years ago. He'd vouched for her at the casino, introduced her to people, helped her navigate the complicated world of work visas and documentation. She had been grateful. She had even loved him at first. But that was before she understood what his help cost. Before she realized that every favor came with strings attached, that his protection was just another word for possession. Before the first time he locked her in the apartment when she wanted to go out with coworkers, before he smashed her phone because a male customer had left her a tip with his number written on it, before he told her that she belonged to him and no one else. "I'm grateful for everything you did," Cristina said carefully, the way she'd learned to speak around Ramon, measuring each word. "But that doesn't mean you own me." Ramon's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Own you? I love you, Cristina. Everything I do is because I love you. Why can't you see that?" He moved toward her again, and Cristina felt her back press against the counter. There was nowhere else to go. "I see it," she lied, because lying was safer than truth. "I know you love me." Ramon's expression softened, and he reached out to touch her face. His fingers were gentle now, tracing the line of her jaw. "Then stop seeing him," Ramon whispered. "Stop whatever this is with your floor manager. Come back to me. Really come back." Cristina closed her eyes, unable to look at him. Behind her eyelids, she saw Vincent's face, the way he looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered. She thought about the divorce lawyer, the plans they were making, the future that felt so close she could almost touch it. "Okay," she whispered, because in this moment, trapped in her own apartment with Ramon's hand on her face, she would have said anything to make him leave. Ramon kissed her forehead, and Cristina felt her stomach turn. "Good girl," he said. "I'll see you tomorrow after your shift. We'll have dinner. Just the two of us, like old times." He left without another word, and Cristina waited until she heard his footsteps fade down the hallway before she locked the door and slid down to the floor. She sat there in the darkness of her apartment, hugging her knees to her chest, and let herself cry silently. Across the city, In a large house in the Summerlin Heights subdivision, Vincent Reeves let himself in through the front door just as dawn was breaking. The house was silent, expensive, and cold in the way that homes become when the people inside them stop really living together. He removed his shoes in the entryway and moved quietly through the darkened living room, but the kitchen light was already on. Karen sat at the granite counter, a cup of coffee in her hands, her tablet propped up in front of her as she read the morning news. She was 50, blonde, meticulously maintained in the way of women who had the time and money to fight aging. She barely glanced up when Vincent entered. "Late night," she said. It wasn't a question. "System issue with the high roller room," Vincent replied, the lie smooth and practiced. "Had to wait for IT to fix it." Karen nodded, still reading her tablet. "Emily has a college interview this afternoon. She needs the car." "I'll take an Uber to work," Vincent said. "Josh has a dentist appointment Thursday. Can you take him? Or should I reschedule my tennis?" "I'll take him." This was their marriage now. Logistics and schedules and the careful choreography of two people sharing space without actually touching. They slept in separate bedrooms on opposite ends of the hallway. They maintained joint bank accounts and a unified front for their children. They attended school functions and neighborhood barbecues and smiled for photos that would be posted to social media with captions about family and gratitude. But they were strangers, polite, distant strangers who had long ago forgotten how to be anything else. Vincent poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the three-car garage, the swimming pool that no one used anymore. He thought about the divorce papers being drafted, about the conversation he would need to have with Karen and the children, about the life he was about to blow apart. And he thought about Cristina, about the way she felt in his arms, about the future they were building together. He didn't notice Karen watching him over the rim of her coffee cup, didn't see the way her eyes narrowed slightly as she observed his distant expression, the small smile playing at his lips. "You seem happy," Karen said, and there was something sharp in her voice that made Vincent turn. "What?" "Nothing," Karen said, returning to her tablet. "Just an observation." Vincent finished his coffee in silence and went upstairs to shower. He stood under the hot water and let himself imagine a different life, one where he woke up next to Cristina every morning, where he didn't have to hide or lie or pretend. Soon, he told himself. Very soon. The Lucky's 24-hour cafe sat on a side street 3 blocks from the Palazzo Royale, the kind of place where casino workers came for cheap coffee and greasy breakfast after long shifts. The booths were cracked red vinyl, the floors were permanently sticky, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that gave some people headaches. But it was open all night, the waitresses didn't ask questions, and most importantly, it was far enough from the casino that Vincent and Cristina could meet without being seen by co-workers. It was 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the cafe was nearly empty except for a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner booth. Cristina sat in the back, as far from the windows as possible, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She hadn't slept in 3 days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled whenever she tried to hold them still. Vincent slid into the booth across from her, his face creased with worry. He'd received her text an hour ago, 3 words that had sent ice through his veins. "Need to talk. Urgent." "Cristina, what's wrong?" he asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. Her skin was cold. She pulled her hand away, not meeting his eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at the coffee cup as if it held answers she couldn't find anywhere else. "There's someone else," she finally whispered. Vincent felt the words like a physical blow. He sat back in the booth, his mind reeling. "What?" "Not the way you think," Cristina said quickly, finally looking up at him. Her eyes were red from crying. "I need to tell you everything. I should have told you months ago, but I was scared, and now everything is so much worse, and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, and Vincent reached across the table again, this time gripping both her hands firmly. "Slow down," he said. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." So she did. She told him about Ramon Delgado, about meeting him 3 years ago when she first arrived from Manila with nothing but a work visa and a suitcase full of hope. Ramon had seemed kind at first, protective. He worked as a dealer at the Palazzo Royale, had connections, knew how the system worked. He'd helped her get the dealer position, taught her the rhythms of casino life, made her feel less alone in a city that felt overwhelmingly foreign and cold. They'd started dating 6 months after she arrived. It had felt natural, inevitable even. He was the only person she knew, the only one who spoke Tagalog when she was homesick, the only one who understood the pressure of sending money back to family in the Philippines while trying to build a life in America. But slowly, so slowly she didn't notice at first, the kindness had curdled into something else. He started getting jealous, Cristina said, her voice barely above a whisper. At first it seemed sweet, you know? Like he cared so much. But then it got worse. He didn't want me talking to male customers. He timed my shifts, would show up at the end to make sure I left when I said I would. He checked my phone constantly, wanted passwords to everything. Vincent listened, his jaw tightening with each detail. 6 months ago, I tried to break up with him, Cristina continued. I told him I needed space, that things were moving too fast. He locked me in my apartment, literally took my keys and my phone and locked me in. Said I couldn't leave until I understood that we belonged together. Jesus Christ, Vincent breathed. Did you call the police? Cristina shook her head, shame coloring her cheeks. I was terrified. My visa, Vincent. He kept saying that if I made trouble, he could get me deported. He said he had friends in immigration, that he could make problems for me. I didn't know if he was lying or not, but I couldn't risk it. If I get sent back to Manila with nothing, my family, they depend on the money I send. My mother is sick, my sisters are still in school. I can't fail them. He was manipulating you, Vincent said firmly. Using your fear against you. None of that is your fault. There's more, Cristina said, and now tears were streaming down her face. When I met you, when we started spending time together, I didn't tell him. I knew he'd explode, but he found out anyway. I don't know how, maybe he was following me, maybe someone at the casino said something. He confronted me 2 months ago, and I lied. I told him you were just my boss, that we were working on some project together, that it meant nothing. She pulled up the sleeve of her jacket, revealing bruises on her forearm, finger-shaped marks in shades of purple and yellow. He didn't believe me, she said quietly. Vincent stared at the bruises, fury building in his chest like a wildfire. His hands, still holding hers, trembled with the effort of staying calm. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice rough. I could have helped. I can still help. I was ashamed, Cristina sobbed, and scared. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt me worse. He said he'd hurt you. I thought if I just managed it, if I kept you two separate, maybe I could figure out a way to leave him without anyone getting hurt. Did he threaten to kill you? Vincent asked, needing to know how bad this really was. Cristina nodded. Last week, when I told him I was serious about ending things, that I loved someone else, that I was leaving him for good. He said, she stopped, her voice breaking. He said, you belong to me. You're not leaving. If I can't have you, no one will. The cafe suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Vincent pulled out his phone. We're calling the police right now, he said. We're getting a restraining order. We're making sure he can never touch you again. No! Cristina grabbed his phone. Vincent, please. You don't understand what he's capable of. He has a criminal record back in the Philippines. Assault. He put someone in the hospital. The casino doesn't know because he faked his background check documents. He told me once, when he was drunk, that he'd killed before. I don't know if he was lying to scare me or if it was true, but I can't take that risk. Vincent stared at her, his mind racing through options, through plans, through the weight of authority he held at the casino. I'll get him fired, Vincent said decisively. I'll have security escort him out. I'll make sure he's blacklisted from every casino in Vegas. He won't be able to work anywhere in this city. That'll make it worse, Cristina cried. Don't you see? If he loses everything, he'll have nothing left to lose. That's when he's most dangerous. Then what do you want me to do? Vincent asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. Just let him keep threatening you? Keep hurting you? I can't do that, Cristina. I love you. I'm not going to stand by and watch him terrorize you. Cristina wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. I don't know. I just needed you to know the truth. I needed you to understand why I've been so scared, why sometimes I pull away from you. It's not because I don't love you. I do. More than anything. But I'm terrified of what he'll do. Vincent stood up from the booth, pacing in the small space between tables. His mind was working through scenarios, through the power dynamics at play, through the very real danger this man posed. "I'm going to talk to him," Vincent said finally. "Man to man. Make him understand that this is over, that you're under my protection now, that if he comes near you again, there will be consequences." "Vincent, no. I have to," Vincent interrupted. "I can't just ignore this. I won't. I have resources, Cristina. I have lawyers, connections, authority. He's a dealer with a fake background check and a criminal history. I can bury him if I have to." Cristina stood too, grabbing his arm. "Please don't. Please, Vincent. Just let me figure out a way to disappear. I can go back to Manila, start over somewhere he can't find me." "I'm not letting you run," Vincent said firmly, cupping her face in his hands. "I'm not letting you give up your life, your job, everything you've built here because of some thug who thinks he owns you. That's not how this ends." He pulled her into his arms, and Cristina buried her face in his chest, her body shaking with sobs. The waitress glanced over from behind the counter but said nothing. She'd seen enough heartbreak in this cafe to know when to mind her own business. "I'll handle this," Vincent whispered into Cristina's hair. "I promise. You're safe now. I'll make sure of it." But even as he said the words, even as he held her and felt her heartbeat against his chest, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was making a mistake, that he was underestimating the danger, that his privilege and position wouldn't protect him from a man who had nothing left to lose. Vincent ignored that voice. He'd spent 20 years playing it safe, living a half-life, suffocating in a marriage that had died years ago. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his choices anymore. He was going to protect the woman he loved, no matter what it took. The parking garage beneath the Palazzo Royale Casino descended 5 levels into the earth, each floor darker and more isolated than the last. Level B3 was the deepest that regular employees were allowed to access, a sprawling concrete cavern filled with the cars of dealers, waitresses, security guards, and mid-level management. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sickly yellow pools across oil-stained concrete. Support columns rose like concrete trees every 20 feet, creating blind spots and shadows where the light couldn't quite reach. Vincent had chosen this location deliberately. It was away from the main casino floor, away from the high-traffic areas where guests parked their Ferraris and Bentleys. Down here, the cameras were older, the security more lax. He'd checked the feeds from his office before leaving. Level B3, Section C, had 3 cameras, but 2 had been malfunctioning for the past week. Maintenance had tagged them as low priority. Budget cuts meant repairs could take months. What Vincent didn't know was that the cameras hadn't malfunctioned on their own. Ramon had spent 3 days studying the garage layout, had climbed a maintenance ladder with wire cutters hidden in his jacket, and had carefully severed the connections in a way that looked like ordinary deterioration. Ramon had learned patience in the Philippine Army before his dishonorable discharge. He knew how to plan, how to wait, how to make violence look like opportunity rather than premeditation. It was 11:45 at night when Vincent descended the concrete stairs to level B3. He changed out of his suit into jeans and a casual button-down shirt. No point in getting blood on expensive clothes, though he didn't consciously think that thought. He just wanted to seem less formal, less intimidating. He was going to have a conversation man-to-man about boundaries and consequences and the future. He'd rehearsed his speech in the mirror of his office bathroom. "Ramon, I know about your relationship with Cristina. I know it's been difficult, but it's over now. She's made her choice, and you need to respect that. I'm willing to help you transition out of the casino. I'll give you a good reference, help you find another position somewhere else in the city. But you need to leave her alone. If you threaten her again, I'll have no choice but to involve the police and immigration. I don't want to do that, but I will if you force my hand." Reasonable, firm, adult. Vincent's black Mercedes was parked near the south wall, between a Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a pickup truck that looked like it had survived several desert storms. He stood beside his car, hands in his pockets, trying to appear calm and in control. His heart was beating faster than he wanted to admit. The garage was cold, and the air smelled of motor oil and concrete dust. He heard footsteps, the sound echoing off the low ceiling. Ramon emerged from behind a support column, moving with the loose, easy gait of someone completely comfortable in his own body. He wore dark jeans, work boots, and a black jacket despite the Nevada heat outside. His face was unreadable, neither angry nor friendly, just blank. "You wanted to talk," Ramon said, stopping about 15 feet away. So talk. Vincent cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. The nearest other car was 50 yards away. The stairwell door was closed. No one else was on this level. Ramon, I appreciate you meeting me. I know this is awkward. Awkward. Ramon laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. That's what you call it? Awkward. I know you care about Cristina, Vincent continued, trying to stick to his script. But she's made it clear that the relationship isn't healthy for her anymore. You need to respect her decision and move on. Ramon took a step closer. Move on. Like it's a job I didn't get. Like she's a used car I'm trading in. That's not what I meant. You think you can just take her? Ramon's voice rose, echoing off the concrete. You think because you wear expensive suits and sit in an office, you get to decide who belongs to who? Nobody belongs to anyone, Vincent said firmly. That's the point. Cristina is her own person. She gets to choose. And she chose you. Ramon's hands were still in his jacket pockets. The rich American. The one who can fix her visa problems with a phone call. The one who promises her a better life. I love her, Vincent said simply. And she loves me. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but that's the truth. Ramon nodded slowly, as if considering this. Then he said, You want to pay me off? Is that it? How much is she worth to you? 10,000? 20. Vincent felt anger flare in his chest. This isn't about money. This is about you leaving her alone. If you can't do that voluntarily, I'll make sure you do it involuntarily. I'll have you fired, Ramon. I'll make sure every casino in Vegas knows why. And I'll call immigration about your falsified background check. You'll be deported before you can blink. The moment the words left his mouth, Vincent knew he'd made a mistake. He'd shown his hand, revealed the threat, proven that he thought authority and power solved everything. Ramon's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A calculation, a decision made. You listen. Vincent's mind went blank with terror. He fumbled for his phone, got it halfway out of his pocket before Ramon's left hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The knife came up fast, a slash across Vincent's hand that sent the phone clattering to the concrete, blood spraying in an arc. Jesus! Stop! Vincent clutched his bleeding hand to his chest, shock making his voice high and thin. But Ramon didn't stop. The knife came up again, and Vincent tried to block with his arm. The blade went through his forearm, and Vincent screamed. He swung wildly with his uninjured hand, connected with Ramon's jaw in a clumsy punch that had no technique behind it. Ramon barely flinched. He was shorter than Vincent by 3 inches, lighter by 20 pounds, but he moved like violence was a language he'd been speaking his whole life. The knife punched into Vincent's stomach, just below his ribs, and the pain was like nothing Vincent had ever felt. It burned and froze at the same time, stealing his breath. You should have stayed in your office, rich man, Ramon said, and there was almost sadness in his voice. Vincent fell backward against the car, then slid down to the oil-stained concrete. He tried to push himself up, tried to crawl away, but Ramon followed. The knife came down again into his shoulder, again into his side, again. Please, Vincent gasped. The word came out wet and bubbling. Please stop. But Ramon was beyond stopping. All the rage he'd carried for 3 years, all the humiliation of watching Cristina pull away, all the shame of knowing he was losing her to someone better than him, it all poured out through the knife, into Vincent's chest, into his back when Vincent tried to turn away, into his neck. Vincent stopped trying to fight at stab number 7. His arms went limp. His breathing became shallow and ragged, a wet rattling sound that echoed in the empty garage. At stab number 10, he whispered something that might have been Karen, might have been Cristina, might have been just air escaping his punctured lungs. At stab number 13, his eyes went unfocused, staring at the concrete ceiling without seeing it. At stab number 17, Ramon finally stopped. He stood over Vincent's body, the knife still gripped in his hand, breathing hard. Blood covered his jacket, his hands, his face. It pooled around Vincent's body, spreading slowly across the concrete, following the slight slope of the garage floor toward a nearby drain. Ramon looked at the knife, at Vincent, at his own bloody hands. Fuck, he whispered. Fuck, what did I? You made me do this. He said it again, louder, as if saying it enough times would make it true. You made me do this. The The garage was silent except for Ramon's ragged breathing and the steady drip of blood from the knife to the concrete floor. Cristina had tried to stay in Vincent's office like he'd asked. She'd locked the door, sat in his leather chair, and stared at the security monitors without really seeing them. But anxiety crawled under her skin like insects, and after 30 minutes, she couldn't take it anymore. She took the service elevator down, the one that employees used to move between floors without going through the casino. Her hands shook as she pressed the button for B3. The elevator doors opened onto the parking level, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Just concrete and cars and the hum of fluorescent lights. Then she heard something. A sound that might have been a shout, might have been something else. She moved toward it, her footsteps echoing. She rounded the corner near Section C and stopped. Ramon stood in a pool of light, covered in blood. At his feet was Vincent, lying so still that Cristina's mind refused to process what she was seeing. There was too much blood. No one could lose that much blood and still be alive. Her scream tore through the garage, bouncing off concrete walls and ceiling, a sound of pure anguish that seemed to go on forever. She ran to Vincent, fell to her knees in the blood, her hands going to his face, his chest, trying to find somewhere that wasn't torn open. Vincent, Vincent, stay with me. Oh God, please. His eyes flickered open for just a moment. His lips moved, forming her name. Chris, Tina, run. Then nothing. His chest stopped moving. His eyes stared past her at something she couldn't see. Cristina's hands, covered in his blood, tried desperately to stop the bleeding from his chest, but it was useless. He was gone. Vincent was gone. Ramon grabbed her arm, yanked her away from the body. He's dead. He's dead, and you need to listen to me right now. Cristina stared at him, unable to comprehend. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I'm calling the police, she heard herself say, reaching for her phone. Ramon's hand shot out and grabbed it, threw it hard against a concrete column. It shattered into pieces. No, Ramon said, his voice deadly calm despite the blood covering him. You don't understand what you're doing. You were here, Cristina. You'll be on the parking garage entrance cameras. Coming down here. Coming to meet us. I didn't know. They won't care, Ramon interrupted. You're sleeping with your boss. I'm the jealous boyfriend. You texted me earlier today breaking up with me. That's motive. You came down here and now he's dead. That makes you an accessory. Cristina shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I didn't do anything. The cameras, Ramon said, gesturing up. Section C. I cut them 3 days ago. No footage. No witnesses except you and me. And if you go to the police, I'll tell them you planned it. That you wanted him dead so you could inherit his money, his life insurance. Who do you think they'll believe? The American citizen or the Filipino on a work visa? Cristina's mind was spinning. She looked at Vincent's body, at the blood, at Ramon's face. This was a nightmare. She was going to wake up. We run, Ramon said quietly. Together, or we both go to prison. You go first as an accessory. Then they deport you, and you spend the rest of your life in a Manila jail cell. Is that what you want? I want him alive, Cristina sobbed. I want this to not be happening. Well, it is happening. Ramon grabbed her shoulders. And you have to choose, right now. Do we run, or do we both get destroyed? Cristina looked at Vincent one more time, at the man who had loved her, who had promised her a future, who had died trying to protect her. Guilt and horror and shock warred in her chest, making it hard to breathe. She should stay. She should tell the truth. She should make sure Vincent's killer faced justice. But Ramon was right about one thing. She would be implicated. She could see the headlines, imagine the narrative. Casino floor manager murdered by jealous lover in triangle gone wrong. Her visa revoked, sent back to Manila in handcuffs. Her mother's shame. Her family's ruin. Okay, she whispered, the word tasting like poison. Okay. Ramon moved quickly after that. He took Vincent's wallet from his pocket, his watch from his wrist, making it look like robbery. He used Vincent's car keys to pop the trunk, grabbed a blanket, and wiped down the knife before wrapping it and shoving it under his jacket. He pulled Cristina toward the stairwell, checking to make sure no one was coming. They emerged on level B1, where Ramon's car was parked. A gray sedan, anonymous and unremarkable. He threw the bloody jacket in the trunk, pulled out a clean hoodie, and told Cristina to get in. "Where are we going?" she asked numbly. "Away," Ramon said, starting the engine. "Just away." They drove through the Las Vegas night, past the glittering lights of the Strip, past the neighborhoods where people slept peacefully in their beds, past the edge of the city and into the desert. Cristina stared out the window, Vincent's blood drying on her hands, her uniform, her soul. Behind them, in the parking garage of the Palazzo Royale Casino, Vincent Reeves's body lay cooling in a pool of his own blood, waiting to be discovered. At 4:17 a.m., security guard Martin Price found him. Martin was 62, a former cop who'd retired and taken the casino job for the benefits. He'd seen bodies before. Accidents, suicides, the occasional overdose in the casino bathrooms. But nothing like this. His hands shook as he radioed it in. "Control, this is Price. Level B3, Section C. I need police and ambulance immediately. Multiple stab wounds. Victim is deceased. It's bad. It's really bad." Detective Sarah Chun arrived at 5:30 a.m., just as the sun was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. She was 45, compact and intense, with 20 years of homicide experience and a reputation for never letting cases go cold. Her partner, Detective James Wilson, followed her down to B3, both of them silent as they took in the scene. Vincent Reeves lay in a massive pool of congealed blood, his body riddled with stab wounds. 17, the medical examiner would later count. Defensive wounds on his hands and forearms. His wallet was gone. His phone, smashed nearby, had been wiped clean of prints. His watch was missing, but his wedding ring remained on his finger. "Robbery?" Wilson asked. Chun crouched beside the body, studying the wound pattern. "Look at the wounds. This wasn't about money. This was rage. Personal. Someone wanted him to suffer." She stood and looked up at the cameras in the corners of the ceiling. Both had dead red lights. "How long have those been out?" she asked the security chief who'd responded to the scene. "Week, maybe," he said nervously. "We had them on the maintenance list." "Convenient," Chun said. She walked the perimeter of the scene, noting the tire marks, the blood trail where Vincent had tried to crawl away. The way the blood spray suggested the attack had been sustained and vicious. "Pull all camera footage from every level," she ordered Wilson. "I want to know everyone who entered this garage between midnight and 4 a.m., and get me a list of everyone who had access to employee parking." By noon, they had the footage. Vincent entering at 11:47 p.m., the cameras going dark at 11:52 p.m., nothing until they came back online at 2:13 a.m., and by then, Vincent was already dead. "Inside job," Chun said, watching the footage for the third time. Someone knew the cameras, knew the blind spots. They started interviewing employees, the pit bosses, the dealers, the security staff, and slowly, carefully, a picture began to emerge. Vincent Reeves, devoted family man, had been distracted lately, spending more time in his office, leaving the floor early. And there were rumors, just whispers really, about one of the dealers. Cristina Reyes, the pit boss told Chin. Filipino girl, good dealer. But she and Mr. Reeves, they talked a lot. More than usual. Chun wrote down the name. "Where can I find her?" "She called in sick 2 days ago," the pit boss said. "Haven't seen her since." Chun and Wilson drove to Christina's apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, they found clothes scattered, drawers open, signs of a hasty departure. The landlord confirmed that Cristina hadn't been seen in days. "Run her," Chun told Wilson. "Full background. Associates. Known relationships." The name Ramon Delgado came up within an hour. Fellow dealer. Listed as emergency contact on Cristina's employment file. And when they ran Ramon's name, his employee file showed he'd also stopped showing up for work. Chun sat in her car outside the abandoned apartment and lit a cigarette, her first in 3 years. "They ran together," she said. "The girlfriend and the jealous lover. Classic." "You think she was involved?" Wilson asked. "I think she knows who killed him," Chin said. "And that's enough." She called the Department of Homeland Security, requested tracking on Cristina's and Ramon's movements. Credit cards, phone records, border crossings, cast the net wide and wait for them to surface. But Ramon had planned for this. He and Cristina were already in Reno, paying cash for everything, using burner phones, staying invisible. And with every mile they drove, with every day that passed, Cristina sank deeper into the nightmare she couldn't wake up from. 6 months had passed since Vincent Reeves bled out on the concrete floor of the Palazzo Royale parking garage. 6 months of running, of cheap motels and cash-only jobs, of looking over their shoulders every time a police car drove past. Cristina and Ramon had moved through cities like ghosts, leaving no paper trail, no digital footprint, nothing that could lead Detective Sarah Chan to their door. Reno had been first. A week in a motel called the Silver Spur, where the neon sign buzzed all night and the walls were so thin they could hear their neighbors arguing about money, about drugs, about everything except what mattered. Ramon had sold his car to a chop shop for $3,000 cash and bought a 15-year-old Honda Civic from a private seller who didn't ask questions. Cristina had cut and dyed her hair in the motel bathroom, watching black water swirl down the drain and wishing she could wash away the memory of Vincent's blood on her hands just as easily. From Reno, they'd driven to Seattle. The Pacific Northwest had seemed far enough, different enough. Ramon found work on a construction crew that paid under the table. No questions asked about social security numbers or work authorization. The foreman was an older Mexican man who understood that sometimes people needed to be invisible. Ramon showed up on time, worked hard, and kept his mouth shut. He was good at that. Cristina cleaned houses for a service that operated in the gray economy, catering to wealthy tech workers who didn't want to deal with the hassle of legitimate employees. She scrubbed toilets and mopped floors in homes that cost more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes, and tried not to think about Vincent's house in Summerlin Heights, tried not to imagine what his wife Karen was doing now, how his children were coping with their father's murder. But the thoughts came anyway, especially at night. They'd moved again after 3 months in Seattle, spooked by nothing in particular except the constant gnawing anxiety that discovery was always just around the corner. Portland became their new temporary home, a city where rain fell so constantly that Cristina began to forget what sunshine felt like. They rented a room in a weekly apartment building called Riverside, a grim structure of concrete and peeling paint that housed migrant workers, recovering addicts, and people like them who needed to stay off the grid. Their room was on the 3rd floor, a single space with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a double bed that sagged in the middle. The window looked out over a parking lot and a freeway overpass. At night, the sound of traffic was constant, a white noise that never quite drowned out Cristina's thoughts. Ramon's control over her had intensified in ways both subtle and obvious. He timed her work shifts, texted her constantly throughout the day demanding updates on where she was and what she was doing. He counted the money she brought home, kept it all in a lockbox under the bed that only he had the key to. He checked her phone every night, scrolling through her call logs and messages, looking for evidence of betrayal that didn't exist. "We're in this together," he would say, his hand on the back of her neck, not quite gentle. "You and me against the world. You understand that, right? If they catch us, we both go down. So we have to trust each other. Complete trust." But it wasn't trust. It was surveillance. It was control. It was the slow, methodical erasure of whatever person Cristina had been before that night in the parking garage. She'd stopped eating regularly. Food tasted like ash in her mouth. She'd lost 20 pounds, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had always been slender but was now bordering on skeletal. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands had developed a tremor that never quite went away. She looked like a ghost, and some days she felt like one, like she'd died in that parking garage alongside Vincent, and what walked around now was just a shell going through the motions of being alive. The nightmares came every night. Vincent's face, pale and confused, as Ramon's knife punched into his chest. The wet sound of steel entering flesh. The way Vincent had whispered her name with his last breath, not in accusation but in something that might have been love or might have been a warning she'd failed to heed. She would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, and Ramon would pull her back down into the sagging bed and tell her to go back to sleep, that it was just a dream, that she needed to stop dwelling on the past. But it wasn't the past. It was the present, replaying every night in her mind with perfect clarity. Cristina had tried to make friends at the cleaning service, had responded to the friendly overtures of a woman named Linda who was also from the Philippines, who spoke Tagalog and reminded Cristina of home. But Ramon had noticed, had questioned her about Linda with an edge in his voice that made Cristina's stomach clench. After that, she'd stopped responding to Linda's texts, had made excuses to work different shifts, had isolated herself because it was easier than dealing with Ramon's jealousy. She'd thought about suicide. Not in an active, planning way, but in the passive sense of wishing she could simply stop existing. She'd stood on the Morrison Bridge one afternoon, looking down at the Willamette River, and wondered how cold the water would be, how long it would take, whether drowning would hurt less than continuing to live with the weight of what she'd done. Because she had done something. Maybe she hadn't held the knife, maybe she hadn't stabbed Vincent 17 times, but she had run. She had chosen self-preservation over justice. She had let Ramon turn Vincent's murder into a robbery, had helped cover up the crime by her silence and complicity. She was guilty. Not in the same way Ramon was guilty, but guilty nonetheless. And guilt, she was learning, was a living thing. It grew inside her like a cancer, metastasizing into every thought, every moment of possible peace. It whispered to her in the quiet moments that she deserved this half-life, this prison of fear and control. It told her that she would never be free, that she didn't deserve to be free, that this was her penance for choosing wrong. By January, 6 months after Vincent's death, Cristina had reached a breaking point. She couldn't live like this anymore. She couldn't carry the weight of Vincent's blood on her hands while pretending that survival justified everything. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror without seeing a coward and a murderer's accomplice staring back. The decision came on a Wednesday morning when she was cleaning a house in the West Hills neighborhood, a massive modern structure with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. She was scrubbing the kitchen floor when she noticed a newspaper someone had left on the counter. It was open to an article about unsolved murders, and there, 3 paragraphs down, was Vincent's name. Vincent Reeves, 48, floor manager at the Palazzo Royale Casino in Las Vegas, was found stabbed to death in September. Police are still searching for leads in the case. Reeves is survived by his wife Karen and 2 children. Anyone with information is asked to contact Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. Cristina's hands shook so badly she dropped the scrub brush. She read the paragraph again and again, memorizing the name of the detective listed, Sarah Chun. She pulled out her phone and searched for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, found the Homicide Division's contact information, and stared at it for a long time. That night, while Ramon was at work, Cristina sat at the small table in their room and wrote a confession. She wrote it by hand on a yellow legal pad she'd bought from a dollar store, her handwriting shaky but legible. She wrote everything: the affair with Vincent, Ramon's jealousy and violence, the confrontation in the parking garage, the murder, her decision to run. Every detail she could remember, every piece of evidence that might help Detective Chun close the case. She wrote, "I am guilty of many things, but I need to tell the truth about his murder. Vincent Reeves deserves justice. His family deserves answers. I was there. I saw everything. Ramon Delgado killed him, and I helped cover it up by running. I am ready to face the consequences of my actions. I can't live with this guilt anymore." She addressed an envelope to Detective Sarah Chun at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. She put a stamp on it that she'd had in her purse for months, and she placed it on the nightstand, planning to mail it first thing in the morning before Ramon woke up. It was the first decision she'd made in 6 months that felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The first time she'd chosen something other than survival and fear. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. She took a shower, letting the hot water run over her until the small tank ran cold. She dried off, put on her pajamas, and climbed into bed. For the first time in months, she felt something approaching peace. Tomorrow she would mail the letter. Tomorrow she would start the process of facing what she'd done. Tomorrow she would stop running. But Ramon came home early. Cristina was already asleep when she heard the door open. She sat up, disoriented, and saw Ramon standing in the doorway, still in his work clothes, covered in concrete dust. He wasn't supposed to be back until morning. The crew was working a night job, overtime that they needed. "What are you doing home?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. Ramon didn't answer. He walked to the nightstand and picked up the envelope. Cristina's heart stopped. She'd meant to hide it under the mattress before she fell asleep. How could she have been so stupid? Ramon turned the envelope over in his hands, reading the address. His face was perfectly calm, which was worse than anger. Cristina knew that calm. It was the calm before violence. "What's this, Cristina?" he asked quietly. She sat up fully, pulling the blanket around herself like armor. "I can't do this anymore, Ramon. I can't live with what we did. I have to tell the truth." "The truth," Ramon repeated, still staring at the envelope. You mean you have to confess, turn us both in? It's the right thing to do, Cristina said, trying to keep her voice steady. Vincent's family deserves to know what happened. They deserve justice. Justice? Ramon laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. And what about us? What about what we deserve? We deserve to face what we did, Cristina said. I can't keep running. I can't keep lying. Every day I see his face. Every night I dream about the blood. I'm going insane. Ramon, I have to make this right. Ramon set the envelope down and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, Cristina thought he might actually understand. Maybe he was suffering too. Maybe he wanted the same release from guilt that she did. I get it, Ramon said softly. I do. This has been hard on both of us. Living like this, always looking over our shoulders. I think about it too, what happened that night. Then help me do this, Cristina pleaded. We'll turn ourselves in together. We'll tell them everything. Maybe because I wasn't the one who, maybe they'll go easier on me. On us. We can start serving our time and eventually, maybe we can have some kind of life again. Ramon nodded slowly, and for a brief, foolish moment, Cristina believed he was agreeing. Then he spoke again, and his voice had changed. It was colder now, harder. You know what would happen if we turned ourselves in? He asked. You know what prison is like? I'd get death penalty, Cristina. They'd execute me for killing him. And maybe you'd get 10 years as an accessory, maybe 20. Then they'd deport you. You'd go to prison in Manila, and your family would be destroyed by the shame. Your mother, your sisters, everyone would know what you did. I know, Cristina whispered, but I have to live with myself, and right now I can't. Ramon stood up. He picked up the envelope and tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall to the floor like snow. No, he said simply. You're not sending this. You're not saying anything. Cristina felt anger flash through her fear. You can't stop me. I'll write another one. I'll call them directly. I've already made up my mind, Ramon. I'm doing this with or without you. That's when his expression changed. The calm cracked, and underneath was something cold and calculated. Cristina saw him make a decision in real time, saw his eyes go flat and dead. Okay, Ramon said quietly. Okay, you're right. We should face this together. But first, come here. Let me hold you. One last time before everything changes. He held out his arms and Cristina, exhausted and desperate for any kind of human warmth, any gesture that resembled the affection they'd once shared, moved toward him. It was a mistake. She knew it was a mistake even as she did it, but 6 months of fear and isolation had worn her down to the point where she couldn't resist the basic human need for comfort. Ramon's arms closed around her, and for just a moment, Cristina let herself relax into the embrace. Then his hands moved to her throat. His grip was iron. Cristina's eyes went wide with shock and terror. She tried to pull away, tried to scream, but his thumbs were pressing against her windpipe and no sound would come out. She clawed at his hands, her nails breaking against his skin, drawing blood that she couldn't see in the dim light of the room. I'm sorry, Ramon was saying, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Cristina. You left me no choice. You were going to destroy everything. I can't let you do that. I can't. Cristina's lungs burned. Her vision began to darken at the edges. She kicked out, connected with his shin, but it was like kicking concrete. Ramon was stronger, heavier, and he had gravity on his side as he pushed her down onto the bed, his weight pinning her, his hands never leaving her throat. She tried to fight. God, she tried. But her strength was fading, her oxygen-starved muscles refusing to respond. Her hands fell away from his wrists. Her legs stopped kicking. The darkness at the edges of her vision crept inward, tunneling down until all she could see was Ramon's face above her, twisted with pain and determination. Her last conscious thought was of Vincent. Vincent waiting for her at the altar of some imaginary future they'd planned. Vincent smiling at her across the casino floor. Vincent whispering that he loved her, that everything would be okay. I'm sorry, she thought. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it right. Then there was nothing. Ramon held on for 2 more minutes after Cristina's body went limp. He'd read somewhere that people could fake unconsciousness, could come back if you released too soon. He couldn't afford to take that chance. So he held on, counting the seconds, watching her face for any sign of movement, any flutter of eyelids or gasp of breath. When he finally let go, Cristina's skin had taken on a waxy, bluish tint. Her eyes were open but unseeing, staring past him at the water-stained ceiling. Ramon sat back on his heels, breathing hard, his hands still shaped like they were gripping her throat. "You made me do this," he said to her corpse. "Both of you. Vincent, you. Why couldn't you just leave things alone? Why did you have to try to be heroes?" He waited for guilt to come, for remorse, for some human feeling that would tell him he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. But there was nothing, just the cold calculus of survival, the same instinct that had kept him alive through poverty and violence and military service in the Philippines. He'd done what was necessary, that's all. Ramon stood and looked around the room, his mind already moving to the next problem. He couldn't just leave her here. Someone would find her, would investigate, would trace her back to him. He needed to make this look like something else, something that would close the case rather than open new questions. Suicide. That was the answer. Ramon went to the small closet and pulled out their bedsheets. He tore one into strips, testing the strength. Then he went to the bathroom and studied the shower rod. It was industrial strength, meant to hold heavy curtains. It would hold Cristina's weight. He worked methodically, fashioning a noose from the bedsheet. He'd learned basic knots in the army. A hangman's noose wasn't complicated if you knew what you were doing. Then he carried Cristina's body to the bathroom. She was light, so light it made him sad in a distant way he couldn't quite access. She'd wasted away over the past 6 months, and he'd barely noticed. He stood her body on the toilet, positioned the noose around her neck, and tied the other end to the shower rod. Then he carefully tipped her off the toilet, guiding her fall so she wouldn't hit the wall or make too much noise. The bedsheet pulled taut. Cristina's body swayed gently, her toes a few inches off the bathroom floor. Ramon stepped back and studied his work. It looked right. Desperate woman, eaten alive by guilt, takes her own life. The only problem was the lack of a suicide note. The confession letter he'd torn up would have worked perfectly, but he'd destroyed it. He needed something in her handwriting, something that confessed without giving too many specifics. He searched through Cristina's things and found an old grocery list in her handwriting. He studied the loops and curves of her letters, then found a clean piece of paper. He sat at the small table and practiced writing like Cristina. After a dozen attempts, he had something that looked close enough. The handwriting wasn't perfect, but he was betting that investigators wouldn't look too closely at an apparent suicide. The note read, "I'm sorry for what we did. I can't live with it anymore. Tell my family I love them. Please forgive me." Vague enough to be interpreted multiple ways. Specific enough to suggest guilt. Perfect. Ramon placed the note on the table where it would be easily found. Then he gathered his things, what little he owned that mattered. Clothes, the lockbox with their cash, his fake identification documents. He took one last look at Cristina's body hanging in the bathroom, swaying slightly in the draft from the window. "I did love you," he said quietly. "I hope you know that. I just loved myself more." Then he left. 2 days passed before anyone found Cristina's body. The motel manager, a tired woman named Deborah who'd seen too much in her 63 years to be surprised by anything, noticed the smell first. She'd knocked on the door of room 314 Tuesday morning for a rent check that was 3 days late, gotten no answer, and decided to give it another day. By Thursday, the smell was unmistakable, and she used her master key. Deborah found Cristina hanging in the bathroom, her body already in the early stages of decomposition. The motel manager had seen death before, had found 3 overdoses and 1 natural death in her 12 years managing the riverside, but something about the young woman's body, so thin and fragile, broke through her usual professional detachment. She called 911 with shaking hands. Portland police arrived within 20 minutes. Officers Ramirez and O'Connor were first on scene, followed by the medical examiner and a crime scene unit. It looked like a straightforward suicide. The note on the table, the body hanging from a bedsheet noose. No signs of forced entry or struggle. The officers photographed the scene, documented everything, and waited for the me to make the official call. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the medical examiner, was a woman who'd performed over 3,000 autopsies in her career. She examined Cristina's body where it hung, noting the ligature marks on her neck, the position of the hands, the condition of the skin. Then she had the body cut down and laid on the bathroom floor for a closer examination. "Something's not right," Dr. Morrison said to Officer Ramirez. Look at the angle of the ligature marks. They're horizontal, not the upward angle you'd expect from a hanging. And there are petechial hemorrhages in her eyes, which is consistent with strangulation but less common in hanging suicides. You think someone killed her? Ramirez asked. I think it's worth investigating further, Dr. Morrison replied carefully. I'll know more after the autopsy. But the Portland Police Department was understaffed and overwhelmed. They had 3 active murder cases, a gang war brewing in the eastern neighborhoods, and budget cuts that meant detectives were working twice as many cases as they should be. A suicide note, a hanging body, and a medical examiner who said, maybe, wasn't enough to justify the resources of a full murder investigation. The preliminary report classified Cristina's death as suicide, pending toxicology and full autopsy results. Her body was taken to the morgue. Her few possessions were logged as evidence. The note was photographed and filed. It took another week for anyone to connect Cristina Reyes to the Vincent Reeves murder case in Las Vegas. Detective Sarah Chun had never stopped working the case. She'd spent 6 months following leads that went nowhere, interviewing witnesses who knew nothing, chasing shadows across multiple states. But she was persistent, and she had a gift for pattern recognition that had closed 37 murder cases over her career. When the national database pinged with Cristina Reyes's death, Chun was in her office working through cold case files. The computer flagged it automatically, a person of interest in an open homicide found dead in another state. Chun read the preliminary report from Portland, read the suicide note, and immediately knew it was wrong. She called the Portland Police Department and spoke to the detective who'd been assigned the case, a burned-out 20-year veteran named Thompson who sounded like he was counting the days to retirement. Look, Detective Chun, I understand your interest, but this is pretty cut and dried, Thompson said. Suicide note in her handwriting. No forced entry. She was depressed according to neighbors we talked to. Sometimes people who are running from something finally give up. Can I see the autopsy report? Chun asked. It's not finalized yet, but the ME noted some inconsistencies. Still ruled it probable suicide though. Probable isn't definite, Chun said. I'm catching a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. She hung up before Thompson could argue. Chun arrived in Portland on a gray February morning when rain fell in sheets and the city seemed to be slowly dissolving into the Willamette River. She met with Dr. Morrison first, reviewed the autopsy findings in detail. The horizontal ligature marks, the defense wounds under Cristina's fingernails, the pattern of petechial hemorrhaging that suggested manual strangulation followed by staging. This was murder, Dr. Morrison said definitively. I've updated my report. She was strangled first, then hung to make it look like suicide. The note, Chun asked. The handwriting analysis came back inconclusive, similar to known samples of her writing, but with some variations that could indicate either stress or forgery. Chun next examined Cristina's room at the riverside. The crime scene had been released, the room already rented to someone else, but she looked through the photographs that had been taken. She noted the torn pieces of paper in the trash can, carefully photographed but not analyzed. She had them pulled from evidence and reassembled. It was Cristina's original confession letter. Every detail of Vincent's murder, carefully documented, and it had been torn to pieces. Chun sat in the Portland Police Department conference room with the reassembled letter spread out before her and felt the case finally clicking into place. Cristina had been trying to confess. Someone had stopped her. And that someone was almost certainly Ramon Delgado. She ran Ramon's name through every database available. Credit cards, phone records, border crossings, employment records. Nothing. He'd vanished completely after leaving Portland. No trace, no trail, nothing. But Chun had one more card to play. She contacted Homeland Security and requested that Ramon Delgado's name be added to border watch lists at every entry point between the United States and Canada. She filed for an international warrant through Interpol. She sent his photograph to Filipino community organizations in major cities across the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. And then she waited. 3 weeks later, she got a hit. Not an arrest, not even a confirmed sighting, but something. A woman named Maria Santos had called the Portland police tip line saying she'd seen a man matching Ramon's description at a Filipino community center in Vancouver. He'd been using the name Miguel Santos, but she'd recognized him from a photograph Chun had distributed. Chun flew to Vancouver and worked with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to investigate. But by the time they located the apartment where Miguel Santos had been living, he was gone. Disappeared into the underground economy of Vancouver's immigrant communities where people knew how to protect their own from law enforcement. The trail went cold again. And this time, Chen knew it might stay cold. Back in Las Vegas, Karen Reeves buried her husband for the second time. The first burial had been his body, laid to rest in a cemetery on the outskirts of the city under a headstone that read, "Beloved husband and father." The second burial was her grief, finally allowed to transform from numbness into something resembling acceptance. She'd learned about Cristina 3 months after Vincent's death, when Detective Chen had come to her house and gently explained that her husband had been having an affair, that the murder was likely connected to a love triangle involving a dealer and a jealous boyfriend. Karen had listened to this information sitting on the same couch where she and Vincent had once watched their children grow up, and she'd felt something inside her crack and shatter. The affair hurt worse than the murder somehow. The murder was random violence, something that could happen to anyone in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the affair meant Vincent had chosen to betray her, had actively built a life with someone else while still sleeping in their house, eating at their table, pretending to be her husband. Karen had considered telling their children the truth. Emily and Josh deserved to know who their father really was, didn't they? But when she looked at their grief-stricken faces, at the way Emily had started failing her classes and Josh had stopped eating, she couldn't bring herself to destroy the one thing they had left, their belief that their father had been a good man who died senselessly. So she lied. She told them the police had some theories about a robbery gone wrong, that they were still investigating, that justice would come eventually. She kept Vincent's photo on her nightstand and maintained the shrine to a marriage that had died years before Vincent's body did. 6 months after Vincent's death, Karen started seeing a therapist. Dr. Rachel Kim was a specialist in grief and trauma, and she helped Karen understand that she was mourning 2 losses, the husband who died and the marriage she thought she had. "You're allowed to be angry at him," Dr. Kim said during one session. "You're allowed to grieve the betrayal as much as the death." But Karen couldn't access the anger. She felt numb mostly, going through the motions of living without quite remembering why. She lost 20 pounds. Her hair started going gray, and she stopped bothering to dye it. Her friends from the tennis club stopped calling after a while, uncomfortable with her grief that refused to transform into acceptance. Emily left for college that fall, escaping to a school across the country where nobody knew her as the girl whose father was murdered. Josh became even more withdrawn, spending hours in his room gaming, barely speaking to his mother. The house in Summerlin Heights felt enormous and empty, filled with memories of a family that had never been as happy as Karen had believed. On the anniversary of Vincent's death, Karen visited his grave alone. She stood looking at the headstone and tried to summon some feeling, any feeling, but there was just emptiness. "I don't know if you loved her," she said to the grave. "I don't know if you loved me. I don't know anything anymore." She placed flowers on the grave, white roses that Vincent had always claimed were his favorite, though she'd never been sure if that was true or just something he said to fill the silence between them. Then she went home to her empty house and tried to figure out how to keep living. In Manila, Maria Reyes received her daughter's body on a humid March morning, when the air was so thick with moisture, it felt like breathing underwater. The coffin arrived at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, sealed and marked with official stamps from the United States Embassy. Maria had sold her small jewelry shop to pay for the transport costs. Her daughters, Anna and Carmen, stood beside her as they watched the coffin being loaded into a hearse. "What happened to her?" Anna asked for the 100th time. "They still won't tell us anything specific." The American authorities had been frustratingly vague. Cristina had died in Portland, Oregon. The circumstances were under investigation. There were no arrests. They were sorry for the family's loss. Maria had tried to get more information, had called the Portland Police Department and the American Embassy repeatedly, but the answers were always the same. An ongoing investigation. Details they couldn't share. Please be patient. The funeral was held at San Miguel Parish Church, the same church where Cristina had been baptized 29 years earlier. The neighborhood turned out in force, dozens of people who'd known Cristina as a child, who remembered her as the bright girl who dreamed of America, who'd sent money home every month to support her family. "She was such a good daughter," neighbors whispered, "always thinking of her family. What a tragedy." Maria stood beside the closed coffin and felt rage building alongside her grief. The Americans had killed her daughter. Maybe not directly, but America itself had destroyed her girl. The land of opportunity had become Cristina's grave, and Maria would never understand why. She kept the last letter Cristina had sent, dated 4 months before her death. It was cheerful and optimistic, talking about her job cleaning houses, about the beautiful city of Portland, about meeting someone kind who made her feel safe. There was no mention of fear or depression or desperation. She was happy, Maria said to Father Rodriguez after the funeral. My daughter was happy in her last letter. People don't kill themselves when they're happy. Sometimes people hide their pain, Father Rodriguez replied gently. Sometimes they protect us from the truth because they love us. But Maria didn't believe it. Something had happened to her daughter, something terrible, and she would never know what it was. The family scattered Cristina's ashes in Manila Bay at sunset, according to her wishes from years ago. Maria watched the gray powder dissolve into the water and felt a part of herself dissolve with it. She'd lost her husband to cancer 3 years ago. Now her eldest daughter was gone too. The money Cristina had sent home had paid for Carmen's education, for Anna's medical bills, for the roof repairs on their small house. Now that money was gone, and so was Cristina. In Vancouver, Ramon Delgado, now living as Miguel Santos, woke up in a small apartment in the Kitsilano neighborhood and went through his morning routine. Coffee, shower, checked the news for any mention of his name or photograph. The routine had become automatic over the past year since he'd fled Portland. He worked construction during the day, part of a crew building a new condominium tower downtown. The work was hard but honest, and it kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. His co-workers were a mix of immigrants from the Philippines, El Salvador, and Vietnam. Nobody asked questions about each other's past. That was an unspoken rule. Ramon sent money home to his family in the Philippines every month through an informal hawala system that left no paper trail. His mother thought he was working in Seattle, making good money as a contractor. She was proud of him, proud that her son had made something of himself in America. He didn't tell her that he was in Canada, didn't tell her about Vincent or Cristina or the fact that he'd killed 2 people and would likely never be able to return to the Philippines without risking arrest and extradition. Sometimes, late at night, Ramon thought about what he'd done. Not with guilt exactly, but with a kind of distant curiosity, like examining an artifact from someone else's life. He'd killed Vincent in self-defense, he told himself. The man had threatened him, had tried to use his power to destroy Ramon's life. It was survival, pure and simple. And Cristina? That was harder to justify even to himself. But she'd been going to confess, going to destroy them both. He'd had no choice. It was her life or his, and he'd chosen his. That's what living meant, making hard choices and surviving them. He slept fine most nights. The nightmares that had plagued him for the first few months had faded. He was a survivor. He'd survived poverty, military service, immigration, and now murder. Some people were just built to endure, to adapt, to keep moving forward no matter what obstacles appeared. Ramon was one of those people. 3 years after Cristina's death, Ramon met Isabel Flores at a Filipino Independence Day celebration at the community center. She was 24, recently arrived from Manila on a work visa, teaching English as a second language at a private school. She was bright and optimistic and reminded Ramon of how Cristina had been when they first met, before everything got complicated. They started dating. Ramon was charming and attentive, taking her to dinners, helping her navigate Canadian bureaucracy, offering to assist with her work permit renewal. Isabel thought he was kind and protective, the perfect gentleman. The warning signs were small at first. He texted frequently during the day, just checking in, making sure she was safe. He offered to manage her finances, said he was better with money than she was. He got quiet and withdrawn when she mentioned male colleagues at work, then insisted it was nothing, he was just tired. Isabel noticed but didn't understand. She'd never been in a relationship with someone controlling before. She thought his attention meant he cared. She thought his jealousy meant he loved her. 6 months into their relationship, they moved in together. Ramon's apartment was small but clean, and Isabel thought it would be romantic, living together, playing house. But within weeks, the atmosphere changed. Ramon needed to know where she was at all times. He checked her phone while she slept. He discouraged her from maintaining friendships with anyone who wasn't part of his social circle. He controlled the money, doling out what he deemed necessary for her expenses. "It's just because I love you," he'd say when she questioned his behavior. I want to take care of you. Is that so wrong? And Isabel, young and inexperienced and isolated in a foreign country, would believe him, for a while. One evening in October, Isabel came home from work to find Ramon going through her purse. He'd found a business card from a male colleague who'd recommended a good restaurant. "Who is David?" Ramon asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "He's just a coworker," Isabel said, confusion mixing with the first stirrings of fear. "He was telling me about—" "You don't need other men telling you anything," Ramon interrupted. "You have me." He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise but firm enough to frighten. Isabel pulled away, and Ramon immediately released her, his expression shifting to remorse. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I love you so much. The thought of losing you makes me crazy." Isabel accepted the apology because she didn't know what else to do. But that night, alone in the bathroom, she noticed Ramon's nightstand drawer was slightly open. Inside, she saw a knife, a military-style combat knife with a black handle, wrapped carefully in cloth. She stared at it for a long time, something cold settling in her stomach. The next morning, she mentioned the knife casually over breakfast. "I saw you have a knife in your drawer. From the army?" Ramon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Yeah, just a souvenir." "Why?" "No reason," Isabel said. "Just curious." But she wasn't just curious. She was afraid, and the fear was beginning to outweigh the love. On a rainy November evening, Isabel sat in their apartment while Ramon was at work and Googled his name. She didn't know why exactly, just an instinct that something wasn't right, that the man she lived with was hiding something fundamental about who he was. Ramon Delgado's name brought up nothing, but she tried variations. Ramon Santos, Miguel Delgado, Miguel Santos, and there it was, a news article from 2 years ago about a murder in Las Vegas. A man named Vincent Reeves, stabbed to death in a parking garage. Police searching for Ramon Delgado and Cristina Reyes, persons of interest in the case. Photographs of both. The photograph of Ramon was younger, but unmistakably him. The same scar above his eyebrow, the same dark eyes. Isabel's hands shook as she read the article, then found another, then another. Vincent Reeves, murdered. Cristina Reyes, found dead in Portland, suspected suicide but possibly murder. Ramon Delgado, missing, presumed fled to Canada. She was living with a murderer. Isabel closed her laptop and sat very still, trying to decide what to do. She could call the police. She should call the police. But Ramon would know it was her. And if he'd killed 2 people already, what would stop him from killing her too? She heard his key in the lock and quickly hid her laptop, composing her face into something resembling normal. Ramon came in, smelling of rain and concrete dust, and smiled at her. "Hey, beautiful. What's for dinner?" Isabel smiled back, her face a mask. "I was thinking pasta. Sound good." "Perfect," Ramon said, kissing her forehead. And Isabel thought, I have to get out. I have to run. But I have to be smart about it. I have to survive. The cycle was beginning again. And somewhere in Las Vegas, Detective Sarah Chen's phone would eventually ring with another tip, another possible sighting, another chance to catch a killer who'd learned to hide in plain sight. But that call hadn't come yet. And until it did, Ramon Delgado would continue to live his life, to work his job, to date women who reminded him of Cristina, to sleep soundly at night despite the blood on his hands. Because some people, it seemed, were built to survive anything, even themselves. The rain continued to fall on Vancouver. In Las Vegas, Karen Reeves turned off her bedroom light and tried to sleep. In Manila, Maria Reyes prayed for her daughter's soul. And in a small apartment in Kitsilano, Isabel Flores lay awake beside a man she now knew was a killer, planning her escape and praying she'd be smarter than the woman who came before her. The story ended, but the consequences rippled outward forever, touching lives, destroying futures, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Justice, it seemed, was a luxury that not everyone could afford.